Longwood Avenue in Boston to like St. Botolph Street close by. But then the whole world of music opened up for me.
And the whole of your world were like two different streets completely.
Yes.
Yeah. So from research of the human brain, you move into a space of learning world music. And did the two connect? Did they meet?
Yeah, so the first year I went through the program. I learned a little bit of Western music theory and all of that. Did some concerts. I was a musician for a year. I did no research, and then I thought, I'm surrounded by the best animals, musical animals of the world. So let's study their brains and let's find out how they actually, so positive psychology is a thing that has been least understood in the world. So we know what happens during a stroke, how stroke patients can't open their mouth or do certain things, but we don't know how, like a master improviser, like from any genre, it's Miles Davis in the past, or let's say Veena Sahasrabuddhe, or Ashwini Bhide Deshpande, or our good old Sudha Raghunathan, any of these master improvisers in our tradition, right? How do they engineer such super fast creativity on the go, extempore, right? So that's an excellent question, I thought. I was surrounded by all of these world musicians. So the first study I launched was in how do they improvise? How do musicians improvise? What are the strategies that they use to power this creativity? And so that's when the neuroscience came into the music. And so that's a study I'm planning to sort of take into the hardcore imaging realm this year. Post Corona's world, I want to sort of do more of that kind of research from neuroscience, hardcore imaging angles. So right now we are at like, behavioral studies and all of that. So yes, we need to know how the mind of a Tyagaraja worked.
And the mind of a mortal man, the rest of the world will do. But the mind of Tyagaraja is what Deepthi Navratna is going to go into.
Because if we find out what these super brains are doing, then clearly we can actually use that knowledge to alleviate other kinds of brain issues and disorders, learning disabilities, or geriatric issues, memory loss. A Carnatic musician is like should have an elephant's memory.
Correct. Yeah.
So they must be doing something to like train and keep their memory like that.
Okay. And
so those are the questions I'm asking now.
Okay. So for somebody like you with your background, I would have expected a book coming out which is related to these two subjects. Now, you're authoring a book on the Mysore Maharaja, which is completely surprising to me. But what pushed you to do that research and get into that space of writing about him?
Yeah.
Because he's a patron of music, and that's how? Music arts.
Yes. In fact, when I was in this world music school, I was looking at these East meets West encounters in our land, and so that's what led me to this Royal Mysore orchestras, which were like in the 1800s, 1900s. Mysore had a full-blown orchestra. So the first time I saw full-blown orchestra in the United States was in 2001. Right, like all sections, the timpanis blaring, the clarinets screeching, like all of that. But for me to sit there and imagine that in the 1800s, in the 1900s, like 1920s and 30s, 40s, that decade, like Mysore had one. And they were like, playing at these bandstands and in front of the Mysore Palace with this full-blown orchestras. Seemed like a very fascinating image in my head, and so I did research on that also. So Mysore orchestras, what was the music, how did they blend Carnatic music with world musics? And so that's what led me to the music of the Mysore Maharaja, who wrote several compositions for the band. And it's strange as it may seem, I had learned many of his krutis before I went to the US, and I felt a strange connection to them, to his psyche, so to speak. And so and then I took up this research project. I don't know how, I was just drawn to his music, and for 2 years I simply caught hold of his compositions, notations of his compositions, and tried to learn and sing. And that's what led to my project Echoes of Royal Mysore. So I've documented and recorded over 15 to 20 of his rarest and popular compositions. And when Echoes of Royal Mysore was happening, I was still, I love this person's music zone. And then I started writing a book about his music. And then while I was writing it, so much of the music was about the man. Right? I couldn't quite separate out the persona from the music. And because the music really reflected on who he was and what kind of a polymath and genius he was. And he also had crazily diverse interests. He was interested in wildlife conservation, and he was a pianist and learned Carnatic music late in life. In fact, he started learning, they say that he started learning Carnatic music after he became the king in 1940. So he started learning something so late, and soon was composing compositions in it. And then he became this cultural ambassador, and wrote several books on Indian philosophy, Advaita Vedanta. So he also lived a very unboxed life. And I was very drawn to that, somebody who could find that freedom within, right? I wanted to sort of be there, and in my own journey. And so I found it very fascinating to finally have found a role model for myself. And so I studied him, his life, his works. And so the biography, it became a biography. What started off as a musical analysis of his compositions became a English biography. And